Part 1. The moment her hands hit my back, I knew it wasn't an accident. I remember the exact sound my body made as it collided with the edge of the first stair, then the second, then the third. But what I will never forget, what still echoes in my head late at night, is the sound of her laugh. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't shocked. It wasn't the kind of laugh someone lets out when something terrible happens by mistake. It was amused, almost satisfied, and as I lay at the bottom of my own staircase, pain exploding through my hip and shoulder, I heard my daughter-in-law laughing above me. So tell me, if you were me, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven her? Would you have stayed silent for the sake of family? Or would that laugh have changed everything for you too? My name is Shabana. I'm 62 years old, a widow for nearly a decade, and until recently, I believed I had built a peaceful life. My husband passed away from a heart condition when our only son, Asen, was just 25. He had just started his first job back then, still learning how to be a man, still looking to his father for guidance. When my husband died, something inside both of us broke, but while Asen buried his grief in work, I buried mine in motherhood. I poured every ounce of my energy into making sure he never felt alone. I worked as a school teacher for 35 years. I saved carefully. I cooked his favorite meals. I ironed his shirts long after he was old enough to do it himself because it made me feel needed. Some might say I spoiled him. Maybe I did. But when you've lost your life partner, your child becomes your entire world. And for a long time, Asen was kind, gentle, and grateful. He would sit with me at dinner and tell me about his day. He would ask my advice before making big decisions. I thought we were close. Everything changed when he married Zara. Zara was beautiful. That was the first thing everyone noticed. Tall, slim, with sharp features and perfectly styled hair. She carried herself like someone who was used to being admired. When Asen introduced her to me, she smiled politely, touched my feet for blessings, and called me Ami, in a soft, sweet voice. I remember feeling relieved. I had heard horror stories about difficult daughters-in-law, about coldness and disrespect. But Zara seemed refined, educated, and well-mannered. At least in the beginning, they had a grand wedding. I spent more than I planned to, because I wanted everything to be perfect. I even gave them the upper floor of my house after the wedding. It was always my plan that Asen and his wife would live with me. This house wasn't just bricks and cement. It held memories of my husband, of my son growing up. I couldn't imagine living alone in it, and Asen had agreed. He said, "Ami, this is your house. We'll all live together. You'll never be alone." The first few weeks after the wedding were peaceful. Zara would join me in the kitchen. She would ask for recipes. We would drink tea together in the afternoon. But slowly, small things began to shift. She stopped coming downstairs in the mornings. She started ordering food instead of cooking. She redecorated the upstairs without asking me, replacing the curtains I had chosen with darker, heavier ones. When I gently suggested lighter colors to brighten the space, she laughed and said, "Ami, this isn't the 90s anymore." It was subtle at first. Little comments, tiny dismissals. I told myself I was being sensitive. Then came the boundaries. One evening, I went upstairs to call them for dinner. I knocked, but there was no answer, so I opened the door slightly and called out Asen's name. Zara appeared almost instantly, her expression tight. "Ami, you should knock and wait. We need privacy." Her tone wasn't respectful. It wasn't cruel either. It was cold, like she was reminding me of my place. After that, Asen started eating upstairs more often. "We're tired," he'd say. "We'll just eat here." I would sit alone at the dining table that once held laughter and conversation, staring at the empty chair across from me. Still, I tried. I bought Zara gifts. I praised her in front of relatives. I defended her when my sister hinted that she seemed too modern. I told everyone how lucky I was. But behind closed doors, things were different. Zara didn't like that the house was in my name. I overheard her once telling Asen, "It would be easier if everything was under your name. What if something happens? What if she changes her mind?" I stood frozen outside their door, my heart pounding. Something happens, changes my mind. This was my home. Why was she speaking like I was temporary? When I confronted Asen gently the next day, he looked uncomfortable. "Amy, she's just thinking about the future. Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. How could I not?" The tension grew thicker over the months. Zara began criticizing everything I did. The way I folded laundry, the way I spoke to neighbors, the spices I used in cooking. She said I was old-fashioned and controlling. I was neither. I was just present, but to her, my presence was interference. One afternoon, I slipped slightly while carrying a tray of tea to the living room. I didn't fall, but I stumbled. Zara smirked and said, "Maybe it's time to move to a smaller place, Amy. This house has too many stairs for someone your age." The words stung. Not because I was ashamed of my age, but because of the implication. She wanted me gone. I started noticing the way she would whisper to Asen when I entered the room. The way he would grow distant, distracted. When I asked him why he seemed different, he snapped for the first time in his life. "Amy, please stop creating problems. Zara feels uncomfortable sometimes. Just give us space." Space. In my own house, the day of the incident started like any other. It was a Sunday. I woke up early, prayed, and began preparing breakfast. I made parathas the way Asen loved them, as a child, crispy on the outside, soft inside. I thought maybe a simple family breakfast could bring us together again. They came downstairs around 10. Zara looked annoyed, scrolling through her phone. Asen looked tired. "I made your favorite," I said softly, placing the plate in front of him. He smiled faintly. "Thanks, Amy." Zara took one bite and said, "Too oily." I ignored it. After breakfast, Asen mentioned that they were considering moving out, just closer to my office. He said quickly, avoiding my eyes. My chest tightened. "But this is your home." Zara leaned back in her chair. "It's your home, Amy. We need our own space." There it was. Not our home, not family home, your home. I felt something inside me crack. Years of sacrifice, of love, of dedication, reduced to an inconvenience. I didn't argue. I simply nodded and stood up, carrying the empty plates to the kitchen. My hands trembled as I washed them. I could hear their muffled voices behind me. Later that afternoon, I decided to talk to Zara alone. Woman to woman. I climbed the stairs slowly, rehearsing my words. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted understanding. She was standing near the staircase landing when I reached the top, arms crossed, waiting. "I think we should talk," I began gently. She sighed, dramatically. "About what now?" "About this tension, about the house. I want us to live peacefully." She stepped closer. Too close, peacefully, then stop interfering. Stop acting like this house is yours alone. "It is mine," I said quietly. "But it's yours too. I've always treated it that way." Her eyes hardened. "Not on paper." I was stunned. "So this is about ownership. It's about security." She shot back. "I'm not going to live my life under someone else's control." Control? I had never controlled her. I had barely even defended myself. We were standing dangerously close to the staircase. I remember feeling dizzy from the tension. I turned slightly, intending to go back downstairs. That's when I felt it. A sudden, forceful shove between my shoulder blades. Not a nudge, not an accidental bump. A push. My foot missed the first step. My body tilted forward. Time slowed. I reached for the railing but grabbed only air, and then I was falling. The pain was immediate and blinding. My hip slammed against the edge. My head hit something hard. I tumbled the rest of the way down, finally landing in a twisted heap at the bottom. For a moment there was silence. Then I heard it, her laugh, soft at first, then clearer, almost breathy. as if she had just watched something mildly entertaining. I looked up through blurred vision. She was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at me. And she was smiling. That was the moment something inside me changed forever, because accidents don't come with laughter. So tell me, if you were lying there, broken in your own home, staring up at the woman who just pushed you, and she was smiling, would you believe it was a mistake? Or would that laugh haunt you the way it still haunts me? This was only the beginning. Part 2, as I lay there at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at Zara's sill, wet against the light from the hallway window, I kept waiting for her expression to change, for shock to register, for panic, for guilt, for anything that would tell me this was an accident. But she didn't move. She didn't rush down. She didn't scream for Asen. She just stood there, one hand lightly resting on the railing, her lips curved in that same faint smile. And then, slowly, she said, "Oh my God, Amy, what happened?" The performance began. Her voice changed instantly. It was higher, trembly, almost convincing. If I hadn't heard the laugh seconds earlier, I might have believed her. But my ears were still ringing with it. "My hip," I whispered. The pain was spreading now, sharp and deep, radiating from my side down my leg. I tried to move but couldn't. My head felt heavy, warm. I touched my temple and my fingers came away red. She gasped theatrically. "You slipped. I told you these stairs are dangerous." Slipped. That word hit me harder than the fall. I heard hurried footsteps upstairs, and then Asen's voice. "What's going on?" Zara immediately ran down halfway, careful, slow steps, like she was afraid of slipping too. "Asen, Amy fell. I was right here, and she just lost her balance." I forced myself to look at him as he rushed toward me. His face was pale. "Amy, can you hear me?" I wanted to say it. I wanted to look him in the eye and tell him the truth. She pushed me, she laughed, but the words stuck in my throat. I saw confusion, fear, and something else. A readiness to believe her. I fell. I said finally. The lie tasted bitter. He helped me sit up carefully, and the pain made me cry out. Zara hovered behind him, her hand on his shoulder like a supportive wife. "See," she murmured softly. "This is what I've been saying. She shouldn't be going up and down these stairs so much. As if I were a burden. As if I were fragile. As if the problem wasn't her hands on my back, but my age." They took me to the hospital. The ride there was quiet except for my shallow breathing and Zara's soft commentary about how accidents happen. And we need to think about safety. I stared out the window and replayed the moment again and again in my mind. The pressure of her palms, the deliberate force, the laugh. In the emergency room, the doctors confirmed I had a fractured hip and a mild concussion. I would need surgery for the hip. Recovery would take months. When the doctor left the room, Zara squeezed Asen's hand dramatically. "This is serious. She can't stay alone downstairs like this. What if she falls again?" I closed my eyes. Alone? I had been living alone downstairs for years without issue. The only time I fell was when she was standing behind me. Asen looked torn. "We'll figure something out," he said. That night, as I lay in the hospital bed waiting for surgery, I couldn't sleep. The pain medication dulled my body but sharpened my thoughts. Why didn't I tell him? Why didn't I scream the truth the second I hit the floor? Because I was afraid, not of Zara, but of losing my son completely. If I accused her, he would have to choose. And I wasn't sure he would choose me. Surgery went well, but recovery was brutal. I returned home a week later with a walker and strict instructions to avoid stairs entirely. Asen moved a bed into the living room for me temporarily. Zara protested softly, saying it would ruin the aesthetic. But she smiled when I looked at her. Every movement hurt. Every step reminded me of that push. And every time Zara walked behind me, my body tensed instinctively. At first, she acted like the perfect daughter-in-law. She brought me tea. She asked about my medication. She even offered to help me bathe once, which I refused politely. But there was something cold beneath her kindness. Something calculating. One evening, about 2 weeks after I came home, I overheard her on the phone upstairs. Her voice carried down the staircase. Yes, it worked. She whispered, "I mean, it wasn't supposed to be that bad, but maybe it's better this way. Now we can finally talk about the house." My heart stopped, worked. I gripped the arm of my chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. She continued, laughing softly. "No, he still doesn't know anything. He thinks it was an accident, obviously. I felt sick. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't imagination. She had done it deliberately." That night, when Austin came downstairs to check on me, I studied his face carefully. He looked exhausted, stressed. "Amy, Zara, and I were thinking, maybe we should renovate. Make the downstairs more modern for you. Maybe even put everything under my name so I can handle paperwork easily. You don't need that stress." There it was again. Paperwork, ownership. I swallowed. "Why does it need to be under your name?" "It's just practical," he said quickly. "In case of emergencies. Emergencies like being pushed down the stairs." I realized something terrifying then. This wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a moment of anger. It was part of a plan. The next few days, Zara's behavior shifted subtly. She stopped pretending as much. If I took too long in the bathroom, she would sigh loudly outside the door. If I asked Austin to sit with me, she would call him upstairs for something trivial. I felt like a guest in my own home. One afternoon, she came downstairs alone. She stood in front of me, arms folded. "Amy, we need to be realistic. You can't manage this house anymore. It's too big, too dangerous." "I've managed it for 30 years. I replied calmly. She tilted her head. "Not anymore." There was no sweetness in her voice now. "No mask, you pushed me," I said quietly. The words hung in the air between us. Her expression didn't change. She didn't gasp. She didn't deny it immediately. Instead, she smiled slowly. "That's a serious accusation. I heard you laugh, and you hit your head," she replied smoothly. "Concussions can cause confusion." My stomach dropped. She was already preparing a defense, making me sound unstable. "You think Austin would believe you," she continued softly. "After everything, he's stressed. He loves me. Why would I hurt you? Because you want what's mine." She leaned closer. "Sign the house over. Make everything easier. Live peacefully. Otherwise." She let the word linger. "Otherwise what?" I whispered. She straightened. "Accidents happen." My blood ran cold. That was the moment fear truly set in. Not just anger, not just betrayal, fear. Over the next week, small incidents began occurring. My medication went missing once. A wet patch mysteriously appeared on the kitchen floor near where I walked. When I mentioned it, Zara would look concerned. "You have to be careful, Amy. You're so fragile now. Fragile." I started locking my bedroom door at night. I kept my phone close. I even began writing down dates and details in a small notebook I hid inside my pillowcase. I felt ridiculous, paranoid, but also alert. Austin remained oblivious, or maybe he chose to be. One evening, as he helped me with my exercises, I gathered the courage to test him. "If someone hurt me," I said casually, "would you believe me?" He frowned. "What kind of question is that? Just answer." "Of course I would," he said, but his tone lacked certainty. "What if it was someone close to you?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. So here I am, months after losing my husband, lying in the house I built, recovering from a fall that wasn't a fall, watching the woman who pushed me walk freely through my kitchen like she owns it. My own son slowly drifting to her side. My name still on the property papers, but for how long? And I keep asking myself, was staying silent my biggest mistake? Should I have exposed her immediately, or was I right to wait? Because one thing was becoming clear. Zara wasn't done, and neither was I. Part 3. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from living in a house full of people who don't believe you. It's heavier than physical pain, heavier than betrayal. It's the feeling of being erased while you're still alive. That's where I was. Recovering from a fractured hip, walking slowly with a metal walker through rooms I once moved through effortlessly, watching my daughter in law glide across the same floors in perfect control. And every time she passed behind me, I felt that phantom shove again. But here's what changed everything for me. Fear slowly turned into clarity. The first month after my surgery, I played weak. Not because I was weak, but because I needed her to believe I was. I stopped arguing, I stopped questioning. When Zara would make passive comments like, "You should really think about long-term care options," I would just nod slowly. When she brought up transferring the house into Austin's name for convenience, I would sigh and say, "We'll see." I made myself small, and she relaxed. People who think they've won always relax. I started paying attention instead of reacting. I noticed how often she spoke about finances, how frequently she asked Austin about my pension details, how she once asked casually, if something happened to her suddenly, how complicated would probate be? Suddenly. That word again. I began keeping my phone recording whenever she came downstairs alone. Not obvious, just tucked in my pocket with the voice memo app running. Most of the time, she was careful, too careful, but sometimes arrogance slips. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the fall, she came into the kitchen while I was sitting at the table, doing my physiotherapy exercises. Austin was at work. She leaned against the counter and watched me struggle to lift my legs slightly. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "this wouldn't have happened if you had just agreed earlier." I kept my voice steady. Agreed to what? To make things easier for everyone. And pushing me made it easier. There was silence. Then she chuckled. Soft, familiar. "You still think I pushed you," she said, amused. "I know you did." She walked closer. Close enough that I could smell her perfume. "You have no proof." I looked up at her. "Why do you hate me?" Her expression shifted, not to anger, but to something colder. "I don't hate you. I just don't believe in waiting around for old people to decide my future." Old people. There it was again, as if my existence was an obstacle. "This house should be ours," she continued. "We're building a life. We need stability. You have stability," I said quietly. "You have jobs. You have options." She leaned down slightly, her voice lowering. "Not the kind I want." The kind she wanted wasn't comfort. It was control. After she walked away, I stopped the recording. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time, from something sharper, determination. That evening, as I lay in bed, I replayed the audio. Her words weren't a confession. Not directly. But they weren't innocent either. I saved the file in multiple places. I even emailed it to an old colleague for safekeeping, pretending it was just a random voice memo in case I lost my phone. Because here's what I realized. This wasn't just about property. This was about power, and I had been giving mine away. Around this time, something else started bothering me. The timing of everything. The way she escalated conversations about ownership just weeks before my accident. The way she immediately used my injury as proof that I couldn't manage the house. It felt rehearsed. So I did something Zara never expected me to do. I visited a lawyer. I didn't tell Austin. I didn't tell anyone. I asked my neighbor's daughter to drive me, pretending it was a medical appointment. Walking into that office with my cane was humiliating, but necessary. I explained everything carefully, the fall, the pressure to transfer property, the subtle threats. The lawyer listened quietly. When I finished, he asked one question. "Do you feel unsafe in your own home?" I hesitated, then I said yes. Saying it out loud felt like admitting something I'd been trying to avoid. This was my sanctuary for decades. And now I felt unsafe in it. He suggested several options. One of them changed everything. Instead of transferring ownership, he said, you could restructure your will. I blinked. How? You can place the house into a trust, set conditions, protect yourself. Protect myself. No one had said those words to me in months. I went home that day with paperwork and a plan forming quietly in my mind. Meanwhile, Zara's patience was thinning. My recovery was progressing. I was walking more steadily, stronger every week, and I think she hated that. The more independent I became, the less leverage she had. One evening, during dinner upstairs, I forced myself to climb once with assistance, just to observe. She brought up the topic again. Asen, she said casually, we should really finalize things before year. And it's smart financially. He glanced at me. Amy, have you thought about it? I placed my fork down slowly. I have. Zara's eyes lit up slightly. And I've decided I'm not transferring anything. The temperature in the room dropped. It's not personal. I continued calmly. It's just practical. Zara smiled tightly. Practical for who? For me. Asen looked uncomfortable. Amy, why are you being stubborn? Stubborn. That word pierced deeper than I expected. I'm protecting what your father and I built. I said softly. That's not stubbornness. Zara pushed her chair back slightly. No, it's control. And there it was again. That night she didn't come downstairs, but I heard them arguing upstairs. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard my name repeatedly. I heard frustration. I heard anger. And then I heard something else. Asen's voice, lower than usual. She's not going to change. We need another plan. Another plan. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. So that's the situation I was in. Living in a house where the people upstairs were discussing another plan regarding my future. Recovering from an injury I didn't cause. Holding on to proof that wasn't quite enough. And trying to decide how far I was willing to go to protect myself. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to pause for a second and really think about it. If you were in my position, physically vulnerable, emotionally isolated, financially pressured, would you confront them directly? Would you secretly gather evidence? Would you leave your own home? Or would you do something they would never see coming? Comment below what you would have done, because at that moment, I realized I had to stop reacting and start acting. Because I wasn't just fighting for property anymore. I was fighting for my safety, and Zara still believed I was weak. Part 4. The night I heard Asen say, we need another plan. Something inside me stopped trembling and started calculating. Fear had ruled me for weeks. Fear of losing my son. Fear of being called unstable. Fear of being alone. But when you realize the people in your own house might be planning around you instead of with you, the fear slowly transforms into something sharper. Awareness, and awareness is powerful. I didn't confront them the next morning. I didn't cry. I didn't accuse. I made breakfast like I always did. I moved carefully, quietly, listening more than speaking. Zara avoided my eyes. Asen looked tense. The air between us felt thick, like before a storm. Over the next few days, I noticed subtle shifts. Zara became overly sweet again. That exaggerated kindness returned. She offered to help me with my medication. She insisted on organizing my documents so I don't strain myself. She even suggested accompanying me to the bank. That's when I knew something was about to happen. One afternoon, she came downstairs with a folder in her hand. Amy, she said gently, I've been researching safer living arrangements for seniors. There are beautiful retirement communities, nurses, security, friends your age. You wouldn't have to worry about stairs. In a more retirement community, my own house suddenly felt like a temporary waiting room. I'm not leaving. I replied calmly. Her smile tightened. It's not about leaving. It's about comfort. No, I said, meeting her eyes directly. It's about removing me. Her expression flickered, just for a second. Then she recovered. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. Unstable, fragile, stubborn. These were the words she kept planting around me like little traps. That evening, Asen came to talk. He sat across from me in the living room, the same room where he used to do homework as a child while I corrected exam papers. Ami, he began carefully, maybe it would be better for everyone if you had more support. Zara worries about you. Zara worries about the house, I said quietly. He exhaled sharply. Why are you always suspicious of her? Because she pushed me, because she laughed. Because she thinks I'm in her way, but instead of saying that, I asked him something else. If I move out, what happens to the house? He hesitated. Too long, we'd manage it. He said vaguely, manage, not preserve, not protect, manage. That night, I finalized my decision. The paperwork from the lawyer had been sitting hidden inside my cupboard for days. I had already signed most of it quietly. But now I took the final step. I transferred the house into a legal trust, with strict conditions. I would retain full control during my lifetime. After my death, the house would not automatically go to Asen. Instead, it would be sold, and a large portion would go to a women's shelter organization. The remaining amount would go into a controlled educational fund for any future grandchildren, with Zara having zero authority over it. No signatures from them required, no discussion needed, protection, but I wasn't done. I installed small security cameras, not obvious ones, discreet. One near the staircase, one in the living room, one covering the kitchen entrance. Legally allowed inside my own property. I told no one because something in my gut told me there would be another accident, and I was right. It happened 3 weeks later. I was stronger by then, walking without the walker inside the house. Zara's patience had worn thin again. The sweetness disappeared. The subtle threats returned. That afternoon, Asen was out of town for work. Just Zara and me. I was in the kitchen pouring tea when she walked in. No greeting, no smile. So, she said coldly, did you think about the retirement home? I'm not going, I replied evenly. She stepped closer. You're being selfish. This is my home. She laughed softly, that same laugh. You won't always be able to protect it. Something in her tone chilled me. I picked up my cup carefully and turned toward the living room. And just as I reached the edge of the kitchen tile, my foot slid. The floor was wet. Not spilled tea, not water from washing dishes, a thin, deliberate layer of oil. I lost balance instantly. My body tilted sideways. But this time, I didn't fall. I caught the counter, barely. The cup shattered on the floor. Zara stood a few feet away. Watching, you really are fragile, she murmured. I stared at her. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. You did this, I said. Prove it. She replied calmly, and that was the moment I smiled, because I didn't need to argue. I walked, slowly but steadily, into the living room and picked up the remote to my security system. I turned the screen toward her. The footage played clearly. Her entering the kitchen 10 minutes earlier, pouring oil onto the tile, spreading it with a paper towel, looking toward the staircase camera briefly, then walking away, her face drained of color. For the first time, she looked afraid. You installed cameras, she whispered, in my house. I said quietly. Yes, she lunged forward, trying to grab the remote, but I stepped back. My hip ached, but I stood firm. You pushed me, I continued. You laughed. I stayed silent, but you just tried again. Her composure shattered. You have no idea what you're talking about. I have everything recorded. Silence filled the room. Her breathing grew heavier. If you show Asen, you'll destroy him. No, I said softly. You did that. She stared at me, calculating again. What do you want? There it was, not denial, not apology, negotiation. I want you out of my house. Her jaw tightened. It's his house too. No, I corrected gently, it's not. I walked to my cupboard and brought out copies of the trust documents. I placed them on the table in front of her. The house is protected. Legally, you will never control it. Not through him, not through pressure, not through accidents. Her hands trembled slightly as she skimmed the papers. You planned this? She whispered. Yes, I replied. After you did. She looked at me differently then. Not as fragile, not as old, not as an obstacle. As a threat, you think he'll forgive you for this? She asked. For protecting myself. I said, yes. But even as I said it, doubt flickered. Because the real confrontation wasn't with her, it was coming. When Asen returned 2 days later, I asked him to sit down. Zara stood beside him, unusually quiet. I need to show you something, I said, and I played the footage. He watched in silence, his face shifting from confusion to disbelief to horror. That's not, Zara began, but he raised his hand to stop her. The room felt like it was collapsing inward. This is edited, she insisted. She's manipulating you. I didn't even know how to install these cameras 3 months ago. I said quietly. Your wife forced me to learn. Asen looked at Zara, really looked at her. Did you push her? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Silence. That silence was louder than any confession. His shoulders sagged, and in that moment, I realized something heartbreaking. He hadn't chosen her over me because he hated me. He chose her because he couldn't imagine she was capable of this. But now he was seeing it, and once you hear that laugh, once you see that footage, you can't unsee it. The confrontation wasn't explosive. There were no screams, no dramatic shouting, just a slow unraveling. Zara tried everything: tears, blame, accusations of invasion of privacy, claims that she felt trapped, living with me, that she was desperate, that she only wanted security, security built on harming someone else. By the end of the night, Asen made a decision. Not loudly, not angrily, but firmly, and what he chose next changed all of our lives. Part 5, when Asen finally spoke, his voice didn't sound like the confident man I raised. It sounded like a little boy who had just realized the world wasn't what he thought it was. He didn't shout. He didn't throw anything. He just sat there staring at the paused screen of the security footage, where Zara's hand was clearly visible spreading oil across the kitchen tiles. Is this real? He asked me quietly, but his eyes never left her. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit there. Heavy, undeniable. Yes, I said softly. And the stares, that wasn't an accident either. Zara immediately shook her head. She's twisting everything. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking clearly. Asen finally looked at her. You could have killed her. That sentence broke something in the room. Zara's composure collapsed. The confident, calculating woman who had stood at the top of the stairs laughing was gone. In her place was someone desperate. I didn't mean to hurt her like that. I just wanted her to understand. She wouldn't listen. Understand what? He demanded. That you wanted the house more than her life. She started crying then, loud, messy sobs. But I noticed something. No apology. Not once did she say, I'm sorry. Not once did she look at me with regret. It was always about what she wanted. Asen stood up slowly and walked away from both of us. He went upstairs. We could hear drawers opening, closet doors sliding, the sound of something final. Zara stared at me through her tears. You've destroyed everything, she hissed quietly once he was out of earshot. No, I replied calmly. You did the moment you laughed. She wiped her face angrily. You think you've won, he'll resent you. You made him choose. I didn't make him choose. I said. Your actions did. An hour later, Asen came downstairs with a suitcase. I think you should go stay with your parents for now. He told her, his voice hollow. I need space. She looked at him like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You're throwing me out, for her, for the truth, he said. That was the first time since his wedding. that I felt my son standing beside me again, instead of drifting away. Zara left that night, not quietly. She slammed doors. She muttered curses under her breath, but she left. The house felt strangely empty after that. Not peaceful immediately, just quiet, like after a storm when you're still checking for damage. Asen didn't talk much for the first few days. He moved around like someone grieving, and in a way, he was. He wasn't just losing a wife, he was losing the image he had of her. One evening, he sat across from me in the living room again, just like he had weeks before when he suggested I move to a retirement home. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he asked. I looked at him carefully. Would you have believed me? He didn't answer. And that silence was answer enough. I was afraid of losing you. I admitted. You were already drifting away. His eyes filled with tears. I thought you were just being difficult. I thought she felt uncomfortable because you were too involved. I stepped back. I said softly. And she stepped forward. He covered his face with his hands. For the first time in years, I saw him cry the way he did when his father died. "I failed you," he whispered. "No," I said gently. "You were manipulated. There's a difference." Over the next few weeks, things unfolded quickly. Zara's parents contacted Asen, furious that he had taken my side. She tried calling him repeatedly. She sent long messages blaming me for installing surveillance and violating her privacy, but she never once addressed what she had done. Eventually, Asen filed for separation. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches in court. But the evidence was clear. The footage existed. The trust documents were in place. The house was legally untouchable. And for the first time in months, I felt safe walking across my own kitchen floor. But safety doesn't erase scars. For a while, I couldn't climb the stairs without my heart racing. I would pause halfway up, remembering that shove, that laugh, that moment of weightlessness before impact. Trauma lingers in strange ways. Even now, sometimes when someone stands too close behind me, my body stiffens automatically. But something else changed too. I changed. I stopped shrinking myself to make others comfortable. I stopped apologizing for owning what I built. I stopped feeling guilty for protecting my boundaries. Asen and I began rebuilding our relationship slowly, not by pretending nothing happened, but by talking honestly, painfully. He admitted he had allowed himself to be influenced because he was trying to keep his marriage stable. He didn't want conflict. He didn't want to see flaws. I didn't want to believe someone I loved could do something like that. He said one night, I didn't want to believe it either. I replied, trust isn't repaired overnight, but it can be rebuilt with truth. Months later, I heard through relatives that Zara was telling people I was manipulative, that I staged everything to break her marriage. But here's the thing about truth. It doesn't panic. It doesn't chase rumors. It stands quietly, and I had proof. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. Asen moved back downstairs permanently, not because I asked him to, but because he wanted to be closer again. Sometimes we eat dinner together like we used to. Sometimes we sit in silence. It's not perfect. It's not the same as before. But it's honest. As for the house, it remains exactly as I structured it. Protected, secure, mine while I'm alive, and meaningful beyond me when I'm gone. Zara once believed I was weak, fragile, easy to push aside. But the thing about women who have survived loss, widowhood, single motherhood, and decades of sacrifice is this: we are stronger than we look. Her laugh did change everything. It woke me up. It reminded me that kindness should never mean surrender. That love should never require silence in the face of harm. That protecting yourself is not cruelty, it's survival. So tell me, was I wrong for installing cameras, for restructuring my will, for refusing to give up my home, for forcing my son to see the truth, even if it shattered his marriage? because sometimes I still think about that moment at the bottom of the stairs. The pain, the shock, the sound of her laughter floating down toward me, and I realized something powerful. If she hadn't laughed, I might have doubted myself forever. If you were on my side, if you believe I did what I had to do to protect myself, then like this video. If you think I went too far, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more real stories about family, betrayal, and strength, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Life has a way of revealing people's true faces when power is involved. And sometimes, the fall isn't what breaks you. It's the laugh that follows. I'll see you all in the next story.